Hello everyone, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of some gothic horror mashups, and welcome to my channel. So, a little bit ago, I did some videos about have you heard of this author, or have you heard of these horror books or thriller books? So this is a continuation of that, but this is for YA novels. So if you're super into YA novels, you probably have heard of a lot of these. But for me personally, most of the content that I'm subscribed to or that I look at is mostly adult. So I don't really see a whole lot of YA stuff. And the ones that I do, I see like the same ones over and over and over again. So I wanted to give a little bit of love to YA horror and thrillers. So if you're like me and you don't necessarily see a whole lot of YA stuff, but you enjoy reading YA, then stick around because this video is for you. Like always, we're gonna make this into a game, and if you haven't heard of this book, then give yourself a point. And then by the end of the video, let me know what your score is in the comment section to see how I did in finding books that you may not have heard of. So we're gonna go ahead and start with YA thrillers, beginning with 10. And this is a retelling of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So this is about 10 teenagers that go on this vacation together on this island and of course get trapped there and begin to be picked off one by one. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a fun time. Then we have Suddenly a Murder, and this is kind of Clue-esque, so if you enjoy the movie Clue or just enjoy playing the game, then I think this would be a fun one to pick up. So this is about a group of teenagers who are about to graduate from high school, and to celebrate, they go to this manor where you can dress up like you're in the 1920s and just kind of party it up like it's 1920, you know, and so they have their flapper dresses and their wavy hair and their pearls, and one of the girls' boyfriends ends up dead, and so the police tell them they have to stay in this house until they figure out who done it, because obviously it was somebody at the party. And so it kind of turns into like a Clue situation. Then we have Pretty Dead Queens, and this is about a teenager who goes to live with her grandmother, who is a murder mystery writer. And there's a beauty queen that ends up being murdered in the town, and she kind of takes it upon herself to be like the heroine in one of her grandmother's novels and try and figure out who murdered this woman before any other people go missing or killed. Then we have Cut Me Free, and this is a child abuse story, so if that's something that triggers you, then maybe pass on this one because it can be a lot. It's a very sad book. It's a very good book, but it can be very sad, deals with some pretty dark subject matter, so if you can't handle child abuse, then this would be a hard read for you. But this is about a girl whose parents were abusive, and she finally escapes, but her brother does not and ends up being murdered by her parents. And so obviously she's dealing with the trauma of that. But one day she notices this little girl at the park who has like burn marks and bruises, and she knows exactly what's happening to this little girl, so she kind of takes it upon herself to help her. And then we have The Third Twin, and this is about twins, obviously, but they've made up a third twin that they call Alicia. And so when they're kids, you know, if something got broken, oh, it was not me, Mom, it was Alicia. And then as they get older and started dating boys, they used Alicia to date the boys that they didn't necessarily want other people to know that they date because it wasn't up to their standards. And so he's Alicia's boyfriend, you know, and so that's kind of how they got away with dating boys that they just kind of want to have fun with, but they don't want to like an actual relationship with. But one of these boys that they're dating ends up murdered, and according to all the evidence that the police have, Alicia did it. But only they know that Alicia's not actually real. Plus, it puts into question, did their sister do it? You know, the one twin is thinking, did my sister kill this person? And the other sister is thinking, did my sister kill this person? Or is somebody else pretending to be Alicia? I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was fun. Then we have Clarity by Kim Harrison. And this is about a girl who has the ability to pick up items or objects, and she can feel different things from it. So she's a bit psychic. And there's a person in their town who ends up murdered, and her ex-boyfriend thinks that she should use her ability to help the police track down the murder, but she's like, no, I don't want to do that. That puts me in danger, and I don't want to do that. But then her brother ends up being the suspect for this murder, and so then she's like, okay, I guess I have no choice now. I have to help. And then there's a sequel out called Perception. So I read these books, I don't know, like 20 years ago, maybe not that long ago. Either way, maybe 15 years ago, and I do remember liking them, but it was a long time ago. And also there's a love interest where she kind of starts to fall for the detective's son. So that's always fun. And then we have Diana Urban and Lying in the Deep. And this is about a girl who goes on this trip. It's like a campus on board type situation where she's in school, but she's in school aboard a cruise ship, and she gets to travel and visit like 11 different countries. And so it's this great like study abroad program that she was able to qualify for. But unfortunately, her ex-boyfriend and her best friend, who are now together, are also on board. So she's not very happy about that. And then soon discovers that there is a killer aboard this ship as well. And then by that same author, we have All Your Twisted Secret. And this is about a group of teenagers who get invited to this dinner that's supposed to be like a scholarship thing where they've qualified to get grant money for school, but they get locked into the room where they're having this dinner, and there's a bomb and a syringe full of poison, and there's a note that says basically you need to decide who's going to die or else you're all going to die when this bomb goes off. So it's kind of a ethical conundrum type story. And then I have 3 books by Sin Belong, starting with Unnatural Deeds. So this is about a girl who's your typical teenager, but there's a new boy at school in her homeroom class, and he's, the bad boy, and she gets involved with him and starts making not very good decisions. And then You Won't Believe Me, and this is a kidnapping story. So we have this teenage girl who wakes up and she's chained to a bed in this old dilapidated house. And there's this old woman that comes and feeds her twice a day. But this old woman ends up passing away. So now she's thinking, if I don't somehow escape, I'm going to starve to death, basically. And then we have Alone. And this one is about a girl and her mother who buy this mansion out in the woods and try to renovate it and fix it up. But it's very isolated, and she hasn't been going to school, and it's always dark because of the trees, and she, feels isolated and all alone. But during a blizzard, there's a group of teenagers that get stranded, and so they invite them into the house, to wait out the storm, which ends up maybe not being the best idea. So I will say this isn't my favorite. Like, I didn't absolutely fall in love with this book, but the vibes were very good, the atmosphere was very good, and I loved the ending. And so that's why I still recommend this book and I keep it on my shelves, is because I just loved the ending. And so it kind of made up for the parts that maybe were a little bit boring or whatever. But so I do still recommend this, but just know it wasn't my favorite. Okay, so that's all of the thriller books that I have to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into some horror, starting with The 10th Girl. This is a former library book, and it says on the spine that it's a YA book. And I've seen it at Barnes & Noble in the YA section, but I haven't read this one yet. And when I read the premise as a refresher, it actually said that this is a story about a young teacher. So normally, with YA books, they're still in high school. So having her being a teacher, I'm not really sure how this is a YA book, but whatever, it says that it is. So this is set in the southern tip of South America at this isolated finishing school, but not all is well at this school, and so our young teacher is trying to figure out what's going on. And then next we have We Hear the Dead by Diane Salerni, and this is a historical fiction novel about the Fox sisters. If you don't know who the Fox sisters are, they are sisters that were charlatans during the height of the spiritualist movement, and they would put on these seances that were fake. And at the time of reading this, because I read this like 15 years ago, I didn't know who the Fox sisters were, and it was really fun for me to learn about them. So I highly recommend this one. I really enjoyed it. And then we have Ruined, and I mainly bought this because it takes place in New Orleans, and I absolutely love books that take place in New Orleans. So we have this teenager who is living with her Aunt Claudia because her father is on a business trip, and she needs somebody to stay with while he's gone. So for a year, she's going to be staying with her aunt in New Orleans, but she doesn't know anybody, and she's the new girl, and they all think she's weird, and she has a hard time making friends, until she goes to the famous Lafayette Cemetery and she meets this girl who she really hits it off with. and she kind of shows her the city and stuff. But then she soon realizes that her new best friend is actually a ghost. And then there's also a sequel called Unbroken. And then we have the second death of Edie and Violet Bond. And this is about two sisters whose mother passes away and their father wants to ship them off to an asylum because they're actually spirit mediums, and he thinks that really they're just mad. But they run away and they join a traveling spiritualist group, and her sister in one of her acts contacts this violent spirit. And I think that this violent spirit might be the entity that has killed their mother, so they want to look more into it. And then we have When Ghosts Call Us Home. And this is about a girl who, when she was 12 years old, she was in a amateur horror film that her sister directed. And then 5 years later, her sister actually goes missing, and she thinks that the house where they filmed this horror movie was responsible for it because it kind of inspired like a cult following. And then we have The Bone Houses, and this one might lean a little bit into the fantasy genre. It says it's like a gothic horror, but it also has fae in it, so it might be towing that line between horror and fantasy. But anyway, so this is about a girl whose family are gravediggers, but they soon discover that what they unbury doesn't always stay dead. And so these people that are coming back alive, they've started calling them the Bone Houses. And I think that the fae had something to do with it. And then we have Diaries of a Haunting. And this is actually a bind up of two different novels. And the first one is your typical haunted house story about this family that moves to Idaho and then quickly realizes that their house is haunted. But I've heard that it has a lot of spider stuff in it, and I hate spiders. They freak me out so much. So I haven't read it yet for that reason, because I'm really nervous to read it now. And then the second one sounds more like demonic possession story, because we have this girl who has this illness and nobody seems to know what her sickness is, but she's convinced that she's not actually ill, she's actually possessed. And then we have Burning by Danielle Rollins, and this is about a girl who's actually in juvie and she's about to get out but not quite yet, and this 10-year-old ends up being imprisoned with her. At first she's like, why would a 10-year-old be dangerous? You know, this place is to keep us away from society, and this 10-year-old girl just seems so sweet and innocent. Why is she even here? But then like fires begin to spring up and people go missing, and she's kind of starting to realize that maybe there's more to this 10-year-old girl than she first thought. It kind of gives me Firestarter vibes from Stephen King, but make it YA. And then we have Shudder. This one is about a girl who is the descendant of Van Helsing, and her family has always been a family of hunters that go around killing spirits and monsters and stuff. And so she has like her motley crew that does it with her. But in the course of her job, they're trying to get rid of an evil spirit and something goes wrong, and now her and her crew are cursed with this ghost sickness, and if they don't figure out how to get rid of it in 7 days, then they will all be dead. Then we have Militia, I'm not sure how to say this, but I've held off reading this because it takes place on Halloween, and so I want to read this in October. So this is about a boy whose family was at this theme park and there was a mass murder taking place. I don't know if it was a shooting, but something in that same vein. You know, something happened at this theme park that killed a lot of people, and so members of his family were killed off, and so he wants to do a documentary about this theme park, and he invites some friends to help him with this. But when they get to this abandoned theme park, they start to think that maybe it's haunted. And then we have The Girls Are Never Gone. This is about a girl who starts a ghost investigation show. I'm assuming it's like a YouTube channel, but I don't know for sure. But you know, she investigates ghosts and hauntings, but she's actually a skeptic. She doesn't actually believe what she's trying to sell. And so she goes to the next location to film her next episode about this girl who drowned in a lake on this estate. But because she's a skeptic about ghosts, she actually thinks that a human is responsible for this drowning, and she wants to take it upon herself to figure out what actually happened to this girl. And then we have All the Dead Lie Down, and this is about a girl whose mother's best friend is a famous horror author, and she invites our main character to go be a nanny for her kids. And so she was like, sure, you know, it's always nice to make extra money. So she goes to be this nanny, but when she gets there, these kids are really weird, very macabre and just strange. And then the eldest daughter returns. She was like away at school, but she's just as macabre and strange as her siblings. And so she's trying to figure out the secrets of this house that she's staying in while she's nannying. And then we have The Depth, and this is about a girl who is forced to go on her mom's honeymoon with her because she can't just stay home by herself. And so she's forced to go to this remote island while her mom and her new stepdad have their honeymoon. And she really doesn't want to be there, but then she meets this boy that she thinks is pretty cute, you know, and this island is apparently full of like white flowers that she thinks are really pretty. But as she's staying there, they all start to turn pink. And so the guy tells her that, oh, the island loves you. That's why it's turning pink. And then there's other weird things that happen on this island. And so she's trying to figure out what is going on with this strange place that she is forced to be at for the next 2 weeks. But the cover has a lot of bugs, especially spiders. And again, I hate spiders. So I haven't actually read this one yet. I think it sounds really fun and I love the cover. But again, I hate spiders. And then we have Secrets So Deep. And this one again might ride the line between fantasy and horror because I think this has to do with sirens. They call it spirits in the synopsis, but it sounds like sirens because her mom ends up drowning at a beach. And there's some fishermen that tell her about these spirits that lure people to their deaths and whisper to them from the water. And so now she's trying to figure out if this is what happened to her mom. And then we have Eventide, and this is a historical horror novel. So this takes place in 1907. And these 2 girls lose their parents, and so now they're orphaned, and they're shipped on a train to Arkansas, where the youngest daughter is immediately adopted because she's still young and cute, and the older one is forced to become an indentured servant on a nearby farm because she really doesn't want to just up and leave her sister by herself with this new family she knows nothing about, and so she wants to remain close. But she starts to realize that there's something strange about this little town that they've moved to, especially the well that's out in the woods. There's, you know, something spooky and eerie about this well. And she also discovers that her parents are actually from this little town and they may have had some scandalous happenings in their past that she wants to uncover. And then I have another historical YA novel called Mirror Girls, and this is again about 2 siblings, and their parents are murdered because they are actually an interracial couple and people had issue with that, and so they were murdered. And then the 2 girls were separated. And so later on in life, our main character, she looks more black and she becomes very heavily into the whole civil rights movement. But her sister is white passing, and so she's grown up being like the heiress to a cotton plantation. But as teenagers, they meet back up because her grandmother, who is about to die, wants to revisit this plantation, unbeknownst to her, to visit her granddaughter for one last time. But she doesn't know that until she gets there. And so these 2 sisters meet after all this time and kind of have their own issues and troubles. But then Magnolia, the one that passes as white, she actually gets some kind of curse on her involving a mirror, and so now they're trying to figure out how to get rid of this curse. It sounds like it's going to have a lot of heavy commentary because our main character is forced to go into the Jim Crow South to meet her sister, and with the whole civil rights movement and the interracial couples, like I feel like this could be a heavy book, and so I really want to be in the right mood for this type of book. And that's it. That's all the books I have to show you. I hope you found some books that you haven't heard about, or maybe ones that you forgot about that you can now add to your TBR. Again, let me know what your score is down below. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post videos every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.